Chapter 72. After that, Lin Jiej didn't respond to her message anymore. Shi Yao put down her phone and continued eating. At the same time, she said to Han Jing apologetically, "Senior Han, I'm sorry, but I might not be able to return to school with you later. I just received a message. A grandfather who treats me very well has suddenly fallen gravely ill, and he really wants to meet me. So, I'll be heading to the hospital to visit him later." I see. Even though Han Jing's confession had been rejected, he didn't give up just because of that. So, he quickly added, "I'll call a car to take you to the hospital later." Saying so, he asked, "Which hospital?" "There's no need for that. My grandfather has already sent someone to pick me up," Shi Yao hurriedly replied. After which, she added, "Thank you, Senior Han." Han Jing smiled. "Shi Yao, there's no need for you to stand on ceremony with me." "Heh, of course I'm going to stand on ceremony with you," Lin Jiej muttered under his breath as he gestured for the waiter to pay the bill. While he was swiping his card at the front desk, Lin Jiej said, "I'll have to trouble you to pay for table 46 as well." The waiter was taken aback. Thinking that she had heard wrongly, she asked, "Sir, are you saying that you're paying for table 46 and table 45? Lin Jiej nodded. He was so stingy that he didn't say a word. "Very well. Sir, please wait a moment," the waiter replied as she began typing out the bill. After reporting the price to Lin Jiej, just as Lin Jiej was about to key in his password, the waiter couldn't help but take a few more glances at Lin Jiej's handsome face. Then, she asked nosily, "Sir, why are you paying for that table as well?" The waiter was in charge of tables 41 to 50, so when she heard Han Jing's confession to Shi Yao earlier, even though Lin Jiej hadn't said a word, she couldn't help but ask, "Sir, are you also a suitor of that girl like that, mister? How am I the same as that mister? I've already had a status even before I was born. That mister." Heh, Lin Jiej still didn't say a word, but the force he used to sign the bill had clearly increased. Because he was in a bad mood, after signing the bill, he put down the pen and walked towards the door. After taking 2 steps, he seemed to have thought of something and retreated. He said to the waiter who was in charge of paying for him, "Oh right, just tell them that the bill has been paid. Don't say too many irrelevant things." Although the waiter nodded in agreement, he still blurted out, "Why?" Lin Jiej didn't respond. As he turned around to leave, he thought in his mind, "Why?" The reason was simple. If you wanted to court Soft Bun, you'd have to wait and see whether he would allow it or not. As long as he didn't allow it, he wouldn't even give you the chance to foot the bill. "Sir, miss, the bill for your table has already been paid." While Shi Yao and Han Jing were fighting to be the first to pay the bill, the attendant spoke up with a smile. The two of them were puzzled for a long time before they left the restaurant. The Lin family's chauffeur had already arrived, so Shi Yao and Han Jing parted at the entrance of the restaurant. The car drove along the night streets of Beijing, and roughly 20 minutes later, the chauffeur's phone rang. It was hard to tell who was calling, but the chauffeur replied with a few respectful "mm" before hanging up. Then, he turned to Shi Yao and said politely, "Miss Shi, Auntie's son just called to inform you that Grandpa Lin has already gone to bed, so there's no need for you to head to the hospital at such a late hour. She instructed me to send you back to school." Chapter 73. Didn't you say that Grandpa Lin was feeling very unwell all of a sudden? How about now? Is he feeling better? The driver seemed to be stumped by Shi Yao's question, and he stuttered, "Why he should be feeling better now, right? Should? What kind of answer is that?" Shi Yao frowned. "Didn't you say that Auntie's son called you? Didn't she mention it on the phone?" As she spoke, Shi Yao took out her phone from her bag and said, "I'll give Auntie's son a call then." "No?" As if frightened by something, the driver abruptly stepped on the brakes and turned around to look at Shi Yao. Shi Yao looked at the driver, who looked as if he was going to snatch her phone away, and her frown deepened. Noticing Shi Yao's expression, the driver realized that he had overreacted a little too much, so he quickly chuckled and said, "That's not it, Miss Shi. What I mean is that you shouldn't call Auntie's son for the time being. Think about it. Auntie's son is currently accompanying Grandpa Lin in the hospital, and Grandpa Lin is currently resting. Auntie's son must be exhausted after working for so long. If you call her, you might wake not only Auntie's son but Grandpa Lin as well. Besides, if Auntie's son is calling, it means that Grandpa Lin is fine. Otherwise, she wouldn't be in the mood to call you, right?" Yao felt that there was something strange about the driver, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She stared at him for a moment, and eventually, she felt that his words made sense. So, she put away her phone and said, "You're right. It's already so late. Since Grandpa Lin is resting, you should send me back to school first." The driver wiped the cold sweat off his forehead as he stepped on the accelerator once more. After driving for several dozen meters, Yao suddenly thought of something and said, "I don't have any lessons tomorrow afternoon, so I can pay Grandpa Lin a visit at the hospital." Hearing those words, the driver's heart skipped a beat, and his feet slipped, causing the car to shake violently. When they arrived at G University, Yao didn't have the driver drop her back to her dormitory. Instead, she chose to alight at the entrance of the school. A second after she stepped through the entrance, the driver immediately picked up his phone and made a call. The call was swiftly picked up, and Lin Jiej's casual voice sounded from the other side. "Is everything settled?" "Yes, young master. It's all settled." Before the driver could finish his words, Lin Jiej had already hung up on him. The driver called again, but the number he dialed was not in the service area. The driver tried 3 times, but to no avail. In the end, he gave up and drove away. Along the way, the chauffeur thought to himself, "Young master, it's not that I don't want to tell you. It's just that you didn't give me a chance. Miss Sher said that she's going to the hospital tomorrow, and if she were to meet Grandpa Lin and Auntie Sun, your lies today would be exposed." Chapter 74. In an instant, Yao recalled the words she had said to 111,111 when they parted on bad terms a week ago, and her face couldn't help but heat up a little. Fortunately, they were separated by a phone. Even though it was awkward, the other party didn't know about it, so the atmosphere wasn't too awkward. Juice was the owner of the room. As soon as Yao entered the room, he started the game. Expert of the Monkeys was a typical chatterbox, chattering away endlessly. Juice would occasionally chime in with him. In truth, Yao would also chat with them, but due to 111,111's presence today, she felt a little embarrassed, so she didn't speak much. Of course, 111,111 was still the same as ever, silent and quiet. Juice didn't choose the desert map today but the PUBG island. Their base was still the same, the military base. Under their guidance, even though Yao hadn't killed a single person yet, she had learned how to survive. After landing, she first found a place to hide before quietly watching the other 3 fight it out. When they finally took down the military base, she would happily run out to loot the crates. The blue zone this time was extremely unfriendly to them. It was located in the opposite corner of Severny. Just as the 4 of them were running into the safe zone with their health bars dangling, someone noticed them. Following the deep gunshot of an AWM sounded from afar, and a notification appeared on the screen. National husband Lu Jinyan, knocked out. Yao loves ice cream, with AWM. Yao, who had been silent for the entire game, suddenly forgot about her awkwardness and blurted out, "Who's hitting me? Where did they hit me?" Right after she said those words, a series of gunshots sounded beside her ears, following which 2 notifications appeared on the screen. 111,111 knocked out. National husband Lu Jinyan, with M416. 111,111 eliminated. National husband Lu Jinyan, with M416. Before she could figure out where the person who had knocked her out was, she was already eliminated by Mr. Numbers. Yao secretly cheered 666th in her heart. Then, she saw that she only had a third of her health left, so she hurriedly said, "I'm going to die. Quick, help me up." She paused for a moment before shouting once more, "Expert Juice, hurry up. I'll be right behind you." Before she could finish her sentence, her character in the game was covered by another person. The man bent down and placed his hand on top of her body. Then, a countdown timer appeared on the screen. Yao was stunned for a moment before she realized that the person who had saved her was less than 111,111. In an instant, she recalled the words she had said to him earlier. She blushed and became quiet again. After being saved by less than 111,111, Yao had consumed too many potions in order to escape from the blue circle. She only had a bandage left, so she could only use it to heal herself bit by bit. After saving her, 111111, who had already left, suddenly took 2 steps back and jumped onto her. Then, he hopped away coquettishly. Then, she realized that there were 2 first aid kits and 3 bottles of painkillers beside her. Could it be that Mr. Numbers saw that she was so pitiful that she could only use bandages to replenish her HP, so he purposely returned and left some medicine for her? Shi Yao instinctively glanced at the top right corner of the screen, and only then did she realize that less than 111,111 HP was dangerously low. Chapter 75. Did Mr. Numbers rush over to save her instead of healing himself after escaping from the blue circle and fighting with someone else? For some reason, Shi Yao's heartbeat suddenly quickened by half a beat. Then, she noticed that 111,111's health bar was rising bit by bit. She was stunned for 2 seconds before she realized that less than 111,111 was using bandages to heal himself. So, just now, he gave her his only first aid kit and painkillers and only kept the bandages for himself? As this realization flashed across Shi Yao's mind, her heart, which had already quickened by half a beat, quickened once more. In this game, because 11111 didn't have any potions and entered the final circle, he couldn't loot as he pleased. So when he fought with others, he died early. As a result, they didn't get the chicken dinner and ended up in 3rd place. Returning to the main hall, Juice didn't start the game immediately. Instead, he said, "Sis Yao, Expert and I are going to take a cab back to school. You can play with Boss for a while. We'll join you guys once we reach school. Yao loves ice cream. You guys aren't in school?" Expert of the monkeys. "Yeah, we're eating hot pot outside. Wasn't Mr. Numbers his roommate? Why wasn't he eating with them?" Shi Yao was curious, but she didn't ask about it. Instead, she said, "All right then, we'll play later." After Expert of the monkeys and Juice left the room, less than 111,111 immediately started the game. As they were playing Squad 4 earlier, less than 111,111 didn't switch to duo, and he didn't cancel the matchmaking option either. Thus, other than Shi Yao and less than 111,111, he was matched with 2 other players as well. Shi Yao and less than 111,111 didn't say a word, but the 2 players were talking to each other. They were both men, and from their conversation, Shi Yao could tell that they knew each other in real life. Entering the map, Shi Yao flew around the plane for a while, and seeing that no one had marked their landing spot, she asked out of habit, "Where are we landing?" Player 1 teammate, HM? Player 4 is actually a girl? Player 2 teammate, judging from her voice, she doesn't look too old. Player 1 teammate, she sounds like a student. Number 2's teammate, Beauty, are you a high school student or a university student? Back then, when Shi Yao was first matched with Expert, Juice, and Mr. Numbers, it wasn't that she didn't try to chat with them, but the tone of these 2 strangers, when compared to Juice and Expert, made her feel inexplicably uncomfortable. She said nothing. 11111 didn't say anything, but he pointed at Pochinki with his finger. Shi Yao's silence didn't stop the 2 passers-by from chatting with her. Number 2 teammate, "Hey pretty, why aren't you talking? Why don't you chat with me for a while?" Player 1, "Yeah, pretty girl, do you want me to play with you later?" Teammate number 1, "By the way, pretty girl, do you have a boyfriend?" Number 2 teammate, "If not, little beauty, do you accept an online relationship? Do you want to consider one of us?" Teammate number 1, "It's okay. If you want both, we don't mind." Chapter 76. Shi Yao wasn't a fool. She knew the meaning behind his laughter. The best way to deal with such a person was to ignore him. Even though Shi Yao had already done so, she still couldn't help but feel disgusted. After landing on the ground, Shi Yao ignored her 2 teammates and followed closely behind 111111. She would head to whichever room he went to pick up the items he didn't want. She had played duo with him before. In the beginning, out of a sense of security, she followed closely behind him too. Unfortunately, his movements were simply too flamboyant. He would either climb over walls or jump through windows. Sometimes, he would even climb up to the roof. She couldn't keep up with him at all, so she could only give up in the end. But this time, perhaps because he wasn't paying enough attention to the game, his movements were very ordinary. In fact, He would even pause from time to time, allowing her to keep up with him. Shiryao thought that by doing so, she and her two teammates would mind their own business and play their own games. But reality proved that there were too many boring people in the world, and she thought too highly of them. The two passerby's teammates actually took the initiative to run over and circle around Shiryao. Teammate number 2. Little beauty, your breasts are really big. They're probably around 30-60. Are they that big in real life too? Teammate number 1. Beauty, not only are your breasts big, your butt is perky too. It's really pretty. Shiryao frowned as she took 2 steps back in disgust. Just as she was about to jump out of the window and leave, 11111, who had just finished picking up the equipment in the room, walked over and stood in front of her, separating her from her 2 teammates. Hey, number 3, you're blocking our view of the beauty's figure. Can you move aside? Less than 111,111 acted as if the two of them didn't exist at all as he turned to Shiryao and said, the airdrop is 60 kilometers north. Let's go and collect it. Saying so, 11111 took the lead and jumped out of the window. Shiryao hurriedly followed after him. Wait for us. We'll go and pick up the airdrop together. On the way to find a car, the 2 teammates didn't forget to tease Shiryao. Teammate number 2. Beauty, you haven't replied to us yet. Do you have a boyfriend or not? Shiryao feigned ignorance. 11111 entered the garage and drove a car out. Player 1's teammate, or Beauty, let me ask you, have you ever slept with a man? But before he could finish his words, less than 111,111's car had already sped past Shiryao's eyes and crashed into passerby number 1's teammate. Number 2's teammate, F***CK, bro, do you know how to drive? Before he could finish his sentence, 11111 suddenly made a sharp turn and sent number 2's teammate flying. Then, he ran over number 2's body. Player 1's teammate, damn. Player 3, are you blind? Number 2's teammate, damn it. Number 3, you're poisonous. 11111 turned a deaf ear to their words. He stepped on the brakes, jumped out of the car, and helped the 2 people who had been killed by him get up one by one. Then, he jumped back into the car. While the 2 people were cursing and healing themselves, he stepped on the accelerator again and killed both of them at the same time. F***CK. F***CK. The 2 teammates cursed even more furiously than before. As if he hadn't heard them at all, 111,111 got out of the car once more and helped the 2 people get up. Then, he got back into the car once more and ran over another 2 people. Heh, is the girl I'm with someone whom you can tease? Lin Jiej sneered coldly as he repeatedly rescued and ran over his 2 teammates. Initially, she thought that Mr. Number's repeated revivals and crushing of 2 of her teammates had already caused her eyeballs to explode. However, after seeing Mr. Number's performance, she realized that even if she had 10 pairs of eyeballs, it still wouldn't be enough to make her eyeballs explode. Mr. Numbers was simply too despicable. So despicable that it made one's hair stand on end. But speaking of which, the mouths of those 2 players were really hateful. She was already in a terrible mood, so much so that she didn't want to play anymore. But after Mr. Number's intervention, not only did her mood improve, she even found the game much more fun than usual. Chapter 78. It must be said that Mr. Number's mouth was truly venomous. The consequences of offending your mother. Isn't he indirectly saying that I'm the mother of those 2 passerby teammates? Even though she disliked those 2 passerby teammates, she didn't really mind if she could take advantage of them. With such thoughts in mind, Shiryao's lips couldn't help but curl up into a smile. Then, the phone in her hand suddenly vibrated, startling her so much that she nearly dropped it. Snapping out of her thoughts, Shiryao tapped into WeChat, and the first thing she saw was a message from less than 111,111. Quit the game. Shiryao replied with an, oh, before adding a, alright before returning to the game and returning to the main hall. Seeing that less than 111,111 wasn't going to start the game, she switched back to WeChat and sent a message. I'm back in the main hall. Less than 111,111 didn't reply, so she switched back to the game. Seeing that less than 111,111 hadn't started the game yet, she returned to WeChat and sent another message. You're not going to play anymore? Just as Shi Yao was thinking that Mr. Numbers might ignore her, she should send another message say, "I'll be going off to play by myself." Just as she was about to leave the room, a message suddenly popped up on her screen. Less than 111,111. Those two later. Shi Yao knew that those two were referring to Juice and Expert. She casually chose an OK emoticon and sent it over. Less than 111,111 was still as aloof as ever, and he didn't respond to her at all. Shi Yao casually grabbed a bag of plums from the table, tore open the bag, and stuffed one into her mouth. As she ate, she pondered for a moment before sending another message to less than 111,111, "Thank you for what happened in the game earlier." Perhaps it was because Mr. Numbers was bored, he replied swiftly. "There's no need to thank me. I just can't stand those two's cheap mouths. It has nothing to do with you." In other words, he would have done the same even if it was someone else in his place? All right, it does seem like any normal person would have stepped in to help in such a situation. But surely the god doesn't have to be so cold with his words? How am I supposed to reply to him? Shi Yao stuffed 3 plums into her mouth before she started typing. "Even so, I still have to thank you." Shi Yao added a cute emoji before adding, "Speaking of which, your driving sure is smooth. Even though those two were trying to dodge, you were still able to hit them accurately." Slip away? Girl, are you sure you're complimenting me? This is basic, okay? Lin Jiej was speechless for a moment before he finally moved his finger and said, "That's true. For someone like you who only knows how to play a low-end game, it's indeed quite smooth." After sending the message, Lin Jiej, who had been sitting down for too long, stood up and rubbed his neck. As he rubbed it, he stopped. If Big White Chubby hadn't thanked him, he probably wouldn't have realized that he had helped her in the game. In fact, even if it was a girl he didn't know in the game, he would still lend a helping hand. The reason was simple. He couldn't stand the sight of people using the internet to hurt others without knowing each other. However, it seemed like he had gone a little overboard. Just like last week at Golden Resplendence, when he saw the aggrieved look on Soft Bun's face, he couldn't help but kiss her. This was really weird. Big White Chubby and Soft Bun were clearly two different people. So why did he always have the same impulse to do things that even he found inconceivable? P.S. Gajalan, I know, but I'm not telling you. I can only say that no matter how arrogant you are, be it in or out of the game, you won't be able to escape my Yao Yao's grasp. Chapter 79. If he had to find something in common between the two of them, it would be that they were both delicious. Lin Jiej seriously compared Big White Chubby and Soft Bun in his mind. One of them was filled with food on her moments, and her mouth wouldn't stop even when she was playing games. The other was that her singing was related to food, and even when she was being confessed to, all she thought about was whether she could continue eating. It seemed like neither of them had a lower appetite than the other. Other than that, it seemed like there was a huge gap between the two of them. Soft Bun was beautiful, a sweet and adorable kind of beauty. As for Big White Chubby, as these 3 words surfaced in Lin Jiej's mind, the image of a white and round, unidentified life form appeared before his eyes once more. He shook his head and hurriedly tossed the image out of his head before continuing his train of thought. Big White Chubby had a good personality. She was simple and straightforward, not pretentious or pretentious at all. She gave off a very comfortable feeling. That's true. For a low-end gamer like you, she's indeed pretty good. Low-end gamer. Staring at those words, Shi Yao suddenly felt a little regretful for praising Mr. Numbers earlier. This doesn't seem like the first time I've been choked to death by him. It's no wonder he's such a reticent person. If he were to open his mouth, wouldn't everyone just ignore him? Shi Yao chose to remain silent and focused on eating her plums. After finishing the bag of plums swiftly, she recalled that she had sent a message to 111,111 not too long ago, but he hadn't replied to it. Now that he was talking to her, she should make use of this opportunity to apologize to him and let bygones be bygones lest she felt uneasy about it. With this thought in mind, Shi Yao picked up her phone and began recalling the script she had prepared a week ago. There's something that I have to explain to you. I didn't mean to say those words to you last week. I said those words in a moment of desperation. But no matter what, it was wrong of me to say those words to you, so I'm sorry. Lin Jiej, who was still immersed in his own thoughts, was jolted out of his reverie by a notification from his WeChat. He took a look at Yao loves ice cream, message, and he was stunned for a moment before realizing that she was referring to the time when she called him an old virgin last week. Lin Jie's expression suddenly turned a little unnatural. Actually, when he received her message in his grandfather's ward last week, he had wanted to reply. However, when he thought of what she had said to him, he felt a little embarrassed. In the end, he deleted the typed words one by one and chose to ignore them. It had already been a week, and he had thought that no one would bring up the matter anymore. Who would have thought? Big White Chubby was such a persistent person. However, since a girl apologized so generously, there was no reason for him to be petty. Lin Jie swiftly tapped on the screen. It's all in the past. I've long forgotten about it. Upon seeing 111,111's message, Shi Yao's heart finally calmed down. However, there was no woman in the world who would like others to call her a fatty, not to mention, a fatty who couldn't even climb onto a bed. Thus, after hesitating for a moment, Shi Yao still decided to earnestly explain to less than 111,111. Chapter 80. Even though it's all in the past and I've forgotten about it, I still want to say that I'm not a fatty. I'm really only 40 kilograms, and I'm 165 meters tall, not 4 meters. I'm very nimble, so there's no way I can't climb onto a bed. I can even do a split right now. Also, I'm as light as a swallow, and I'm really good at high jumping. I even got first place in my school's high jump competition during the high school sports meet. Lin Jie was in the midst of drinking water when he saw Yao loves ice cream. Messages coming in one after another, and he couldn't help but spurt out his drink. Did Big White Chubby have to be so adorable? Why is she so insistent on explaining things to me? Is it because we're separated by the internet and no one knows who the other is, so she's acting so brazenly? All right, you're not a fatty. You're a stubborn fatty. Lin Jie thought as he typed on the screen and replied, I believe you. In order to express his sincerity, Lin Jie intentionally changed the to. After sending the message, Lin Jie casually put his phone down. A moment later, he picked it up again and began typing on the keyboard once more. Let me make it clear to you that I'm not an old virgin. I'm a man who loves his chastity. The reason why I've never had a girlfriend since I was young is because I'm not fickle. Of course, I'm not the ugliest man in the universe, and I'm not so ugly that my roommates can't even eat when they see me. On the contrary, I'm very handsome, and there are countless girls chasing after me. The number of love letters I've received is more than the number of math problems you've done. I'm not bragging to you, but I'm even more handsome than those celebrities. I've always been the most handsome man in the school ever since I was young. It's because I'm a man that I can't participate in the Campus Belle competition. If I didn't have any integrity, the title of Campus Belle and Campus Hunk would be mine. Shi Yao, who had just taken a huge mouthful of yogurt, nearly spurted it out when she saw the string of messages on the screen. It was fortunate that she managed to hold it in, or else it would be a pity to waste the yogurt. But then again, this Mr. Numbers sure knows how to brag. Does he take me for a fool? If he was really as handsome as he said, with so many girls chasing after him, she didn't believe that he didn't have a girlfriend. It was most likely because they didn't interact with each other in real life, which was why they were so confident, right? Forget it. Since he had said that he trusted her, she would be merciful and not expose him. Thus, Shi Yao typed a few words on the screen. I believe you. Just as Shi Yao was about to hit send, she remembered that Mr. Numbers had used an exclamation mark to express his sincerity, so she decided to change the period to an exclamation mark as well. Shi Yao paused for a moment before adding 2 more exclamation marks. Grandpa Lin, who was leisurely sipping on his tea by the headboard, shot a peculiar glance at Shi Yao, who had appeared out of nowhere, and Lin Jie, who had also appeared out of nowhere. After which, he quickly adjusted his expression and feigned a look of severe illness. With a feeble voice, he turned to Auntie Sun and said, This cup is a little heavy. I'll need you to change it for me. Auntie Sun hurriedly obeyed. Grandpa Lin took 2 sips of tea very reluctantly. Auntie Sun, I'm a little tired. Help me lie down. Auntie Sun did as she was told. After Grandpa Lin was done lying down, He turned to Lin Jiej and asked, "Don't you have lessons this afternoon?" Chapter 82. Recovering from his shock, Lin Jiej tried his best to maintain his composure. As he walked into the ward, he casually came up with an excuse. The Demon King is experiencing menstrual cramps. Demon King? Grandpa Lin frowned. That Zhang Laosher? Isn't he a male professor? Lin Jiej was silent for 2 seconds before he feigned a calm O and replied, "I missed out 2 words. His wife." "Is that so?" Grandpa Lin took Lin Jiej's words to be true. Then, he recalled that Professor Zhang, whom Lin Jiej referred to as the Demon King, was already in his 60s. Yet, his wife was still experiencing menstrual cramps. Perhaps there was a huge age gap between the two of them, so he added, "Professor Zhang's wife is quite young." Lin Jiej's lips twitched, but he didn't say a word. Grandpa Lin couldn't be bothered with him anymore. He turned to Shi Yao and said, "Yao Yao, why are you still standing? Sit down." Grandpa Lin's Yao Yao made Lin Jiej feel as if he had been whipped and his back tensed up. Shi Yao obediently replied, "Grandpa Lin," before walking over to the bed. "Yao Yao, why did you suddenly come over today?" Grandpa Lin's tone was always amiable when he spoke to Shi Yao. But in Lin Jiej's ears, his tone was like a series of exploding mines. Before Shi Yao could speak, he had already interjected, "Shi Yao, don't you have any lessons this afternoon?" Shi Yao was just about to reply to Grandpa Lin's question, but Lin Jiej's sudden interruption left her stunned. He's actually taking the initiative to talk to me? This seems to be the first time something like this has happened in the past few years. Shi Yao was stunned for 2 seconds before she turned to look at Lin Jiej with a look of disbelief. She didn't say a word, only giving him a slight nod of her head. Thinking that he was going to ignore her, she turned around to reply to Grandpa Lin. But before she could do anything, his nonchalant voice sounded once more, "Have you eaten?" Shi Yao's pitch-black eyes darted around in thought for a moment before she slowly nodded to Lin Jiej and said, "I ate it." "What did you eat?" Was this an awkward conversation? Shi Yao blinked her eyes a few times before replying, "Yuxiang shredded pork, red braised pork, Sichuan poached fish, tea egg, a bowl of rice, a bowl of corn soup with ribs." He was just changing the topic. Did she have to reply in such detail? But Soft Bun actually has such a huge appetite? She could eat even more than him. With such a thin and weak body, she actually hid such an astonishing appetite. She really couldn't be underestimated. While Lin Jiej was in a daze, Shi Yao had already turned to Grandpa Lin and asked, "Grandpa Lin, you..." Barely after Shi Yao said those words, a piercing sound suddenly echoed in the air. It was the sound of the chair dragging on the floor, following which a chair was placed behind Shi Yao. Before Shi Yao could make sense of what was going on, the reticent Lin Jiej suddenly spoke up once more. "Take a seat." Overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, Shi Yao glanced at the chair before turning to look at Lin Jiej, not daring to sit down. "Think it's dirty? I'll wipe it for you then." As he spoke, Lin Jiej really reached for a napkin. Chapter 83. Do you want some water? There's no need, thank you. What about yogurt? Thank you. But what about milk? Thank you. What about fruits? Thank you. Which one do you want to eat? I'll wash it for you. Shi Yao felt as if she was sitting on a carpet of needles. Other than shaking her head, she wasn't able to utter a single word. Grandpa Lin, who was seated by the side, subtly winked at Auntie Sun upon seeing this sight, seemingly amused. "The heck, this is even more taxing on my IQ than doing 100 advanced mathematics questions." Lin Jiej racked his brains to say everything he could, but for a moment, he stumbled. In this moment, Shi Yao, who was still thinking about the main reason why she was here, turned to Grandpa Lin and asked with a gentle voice, "Grandpa Lin, are you feeling better? Do you still feel any discomfort?" Ever since he was young, Lin Jiej had always been able to calmly say that it had nothing to do with him, no matter how big of a mess he made. Yet, upon hearing those words, a layer of cold sweat crept up his back. Why is Soft Bun just as persistent as Big White Chubby? I've been trying to change the topic for so long, but how did she still manage to come back? Grandpa Lin was overjoyed by Shi Yao's concern. With Yao Yao's concern, no matter how serious my illness is, it doesn't matter anymore. Shi Yao's lips curled into a smile as she spoke up once more. This time, before Lin Jiej could stop or interrupt her, her words had already flowed out from the gaps between her lips. Grandpa, I'm really sorry about last night. I should have come to see you. A hint of doubt surfaced on Grandpa Lin's relaxed expression. Last night? What happened last night? What's to come has finally come. Gritting his teeth, Lin Jiej turned to look out the window, not daring to look at what was about to happen in the ward. Shi Yao blinked her eyes. Thinking that Grandpa Lin was still in a daze, she spoke up once more. Didn't you suddenly feel unwell last night? You kept calling my name, wanting to see me, and even had the chauffeur fetch me. Last night, none of them came to the hospital to disturb him, and he happily dragged Annie's son along to cook hot pot together. How did it suddenly turn into him being unwell, and he even called out Yao Yao's name? Old Master Lin was stunned and thought that he was dreaming, since his lie had been exposed, and he didn't want her to know that he was the mastermind. Then, since being tactful didn't work, he could only use force. With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jiej gritted his teeth as he turned his gaze toward his grandfather. He interjected before his grandfather could speak, looking as if he had just remembered something after Shi Yao's reminder. If Yao Yao hadn't brought it up, I would have forgotten about it. Grandfather, how are you feeling now? Are you feeling better than last night? Do you need me to ask my sister abroad to invite an expert to come back and take a good look? Yao Yao? Yao Yao. Shi Yao's lips parted slightly, and roughly 5 seconds later, she stared blankly at Lin Jiej. Did he just call her Yao Yao? Grandpa Lin was even more confused by Lin Jiej's words. Annie's son made a cake, and I thought that you would surely like it, so I asked them to send it over to you. I don't even have the strength to finish a sentence. Since you're so heartless, then don't blame me for putting you in your place. Anyway, there's no cake. You'll have to figure out a way to get it yourself. With this thought in mind, Grandpa Lin turned to Lin Jiej and said, The cake is in the fridge at home. Aren't you from the same school as Yao Yao? Why don't you go home later to get it and send it back to Yao Yao? Lin Jiej's eyelids fluttered, and he replied with an "oh" in agreement. Chapter 85. After hearing Grandpa Lin's explanation, Shi Yao took it for granted. She obediently reminded Grandpa Lin to take care of himself, but before she could finish her words, someone knocked on the door of the ward. Standing at the side, Auntie's son, who had chosen to protect herself from the very beginning and had not spoken a single word since the beginning, walked toward the door of the ward as she asked in a slightly perplexed tone, The doctor just checked the ward. Who could have come at this hour? Opening the door, Auntie's son saw who it was, and she exclaimed in astonishment, Miss Liang, why are you here? Miss Liang? Isn't that Liang Mumu? Shi Yao turned around and looked at the door. Dressed in a light yellow dress, Liang Mumu stood at the entrance of the ward with a bright smile on her face. She greeted Annie's son politely. Annie's son, nice to meet you. I'm here to visit Grandpa Lin. Annie's son stepped aside and said, Miss Liang, please come in. Upon seeing Liang Mumu, Shi Yao hurriedly stood up and said, Mumu. While Shi Yao wasn't paying attention, Grandpa Lin immediately made use of this opportunity to shoot a warning glare at Lin Jiej. Hearing Shi Yao's voice, Liang Mumu turned to look at her, and the smile on her face grew even more radiant. What a coincidence. Yao Yao, you're here to visit Grandpa Lin too. Before Shi Yao could say anything, Liang Mumu's gaze fell on Lin Jiej, and she said graciously, Brother Jia, you're here too. Ignoring his grandfather's menacing glare, Lin Jiej nodded at Liang Mumu silently. Liang Mumu was used to Lin Jiej's cold attitude, so she didn't take it to heart. In the next second, she turned to look at Grandpa Lin with a bright smile and said, Grandpa Lin, I heard from Yao Yao that you're ill. I've been wanting to visit you for a long time, but I've been busy lately, so I haven't been able to find the time. I didn't think that I would bump into Brother Jia and Yao Yao here today. As she spoke, Liang Mumu lifted the bags in her hands and said, These are some nutritional supplements that I specially bought for you at the supermarket. As soon as Liang Mumu spoke, Grandpa Lin had already retracted his gaze from Lin Jiej. He waited for Liang Mumu to finish her words before replying with a smile, Mumu, you're getting more and more sensible. Grandpa Lin, what are you saying? You doted on me a lot when I was young. Now that you're sick, isn't it only right for me to come and visit you? Liang Mumu passed the nutritional supplements to Annie's son one by one, not forgetting to tell her how and when to consume them. Due to Liang Mumu's arrival, the ward became much livelier. Ever since she was young, she had always been a smooth talker. Her mouth was also very sweet, so much so that old Master Lin was unable to close his mouth. On the other hand, Shi Yao found herself at a loss for words. Eventually, Shi Yao decided to just sit by the side and focus on munching on the apple that Annie's son had washed for her. Lin Jiej was leaning against the windowsill with his head lowered, looking at his phone, as if he was out in the open. From time to time, Liang Mumu would say something to him. Sometimes, he would nod his head, but other times, it was as if he hadn't heard anything at all. Before class, Lin Jiej had forgotten to charge his phone. He had been browsing through Weibo for a while when his phone suddenly reminded him that it was low on battery, so he quickly put his phone away. Chapter 86. Not too far away, Liang Mumu seemed to be saying something to her grandfather. Her voice rose and fell rhythmically, but Lin Jiej found it a little too noisy. After standing in the room for a while, he finally couldn't take it anymore, so he straightened his body, intending to head out for some fresh air. However, before he could do so, he caught sight of Shi Yao sitting on a chair not too far away from him. The young lady was holding an apple that was roughly the size of her face, and she was munching on it intently. It was as if there was nothing else in her eyes other than the apple in her hands. Every time she took a bite of the apple, her eyes would curve into a smile. It was as if she had the entire world in her hands, and there were traces of bliss all around her. He had seen people eating with gusto before, but this was the first time he was seeing someone eating so happily. She sure was a girl who was easily satisfied with what she had. Lin Jiej couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. Towards the end, when the young lady's eyes curved into a smile as she took a bite of the apple, the corners of his lips curled up as well. After staring for some time, the sunlight from the window shone into the room through the window and onto Shi Yao's body, making her fair and tender skin appear even more exquisite. The sight before him was a little beautiful, so beautiful that Lin Jiej felt an urge to preserve it forever. As this thought flashed across his mind, he subconsciously took out his low-battery phone from his pocket, tapped on the camera, and silently aimed it at Shi Yao. At this moment, Shi Yao happened to take a big bite of the apple, causing her cheeks to puff up. In an instant, her delicate oval face became round and adorable. Lin Jiej quickly tapped on the camera to capture this scene. "Brother Jia, are you returning to school or going home?" Before Lin Jiej could take a closer look at the photo he had taken, Liang Mumu's gentle voice sounded from the side. Lin Jiej shot a glance at Liang Mumu before replying impassively, "Let's talk about it later." At the same time, he locked his phone back into his pocket. "I was thinking that if you were to go home, we could." Liang Mumu spoke up once more, but Lin Jiej didn't say anything else. On the other hand, Shi Yao's phone suddenly rang with a ding-dong. While chewing on the apple, she freed one hand to take out her phone from her bag. "Yao Yao, how about you? Are you in a hurry to return to school? If you're not in a hurry, you can go to my house for dinner first. It just so happens that my cousin sent us Hokkaido crabs this morning. I can ask my aunt to cook for us tonight." As Liang Mumu spoke, she walked up to Shi Yao and feigned exhaustion from standing for too long. Then, she hugged Shi Yao from the back and placed her weight on Shi Yao's body. "It's fine." Chapter 87. Shi Yao replied as she stowed her phone away. "Your classmate?" When did Liang Mumu become so curious about what she was doing in school? Shi Yao's chewing on her apple paused for a moment, and she fell silent for 2 seconds before replying, "No, it's a senior of mine." "Han Jing? Senior? Is it that senior Han who confessed to me?" Inconspicuously, Lin Jiej frowned. "Wah Yao Yao, I'm so envious of you. Your senior actually treats you so well. He even sent you the souvenirs his mother sent you as soon as possible. Why don't I have such a good classmate?" Liang Mumu's tone was filled with envy, just like her own words. On the bed, Grandpa Lin, who wasn't paying much attention to Shi Yao's message, suddenly turned to look at Shi Yao warily upon hearing those words. Shi Yao didn't respond to Liang Mumu's words. Instead, her lips curled up slightly before she continued eating her apple. On the other hand, Liang Mumu seemed to have yet to finish her conversation with Shi Yao. As if recalling something, she spoke up once more. Yao Yao, I seem to remember something. Senior Han is from the same hometown as one of your roommates, right? I do have quite an impression of him. He seems to be quite good-looking, has a good personality, and is quite a gentle person. If I remember correctly, on your birthday last year, he was the one who secretly paid the bill, right? A deep frown appeared on Grandpa Lin's forehead. To send gifts to Yao Yao as soon as possible and even secretly pay for her birthday. What kind of relationship does that male senior have with Yao Yao? So, they're already so close. He even attended her birthday banquet. Speaking of which, when is her birthday? Lin Jiej suddenly felt vexed. Other than the fact that her name is Shi Yao and that she has a big appetite, I don't know anything about her at all. Yao Yao, speaking of which, you and I can be considered to be acquainted. I remember that we even went to a bar together once. Lin Jiej felt a ball of fire burning in his chest, and his frown deepened. Liang Juxi's cousin Shur is sick in the head. Why does she keep bringing up this topic? But before the word long could form in Lin Jiej's mind, he suddenly froze. Roughly 2 seconds later, he raised his head to look at Liang Mumu, who seemed to be chatting innocently with Shi Yao in her arms, before turning his gaze to his grandfather. Upon seeing the slight displeasure on his grandfather's face, Lin Jiej came to a realization. The difference between two girls was really huge. Isn't it good to live a simple life? Why did he have to make himself so hateful, dirty, and vile? But soft bun, should I call her a fool, or should I call her innocent? Could she not see through such an obvious trick? Grandpa was really something. The fiancé he found for him was actually a little idiot, but so be it. He was smart anyway. He saw the girl take out her phone, unlock the screen, and open the message. It really was Han Jing who had replied to her message. Even though there were a few lines of words, with his amazing eyesight, he could still see them clearly. When are you coming back? This time's specialty can't be left overnight. It'll go bad. My mom sent it over and put a lot of ice bags in it to barely keep it from going bad. So, we still have to eat it tonight. Shi Yao moved her fingers and said, I should be able to reach the academy in around half an hour. Senior Han. Okay then, tell me when you arrive. I'll send it over to you. Lin Jiej didn't bother looking at Shi Yao's subsequent messages. Instead, he turned his gaze to the window. He stared at the rapidly retreating street for a moment before a glint flashed across his eyes, and he said, Let's make a trip home first. Chapter 89. Lin Jiej didn't bother looking at Shi Yao's subsequent messages. Instead, he turned his gaze to the window. He stared at the passing scenery for a moment before a glint flashed across his eyes, and he said, Let's make a trip home first. The car was initially quiet, but his abrupt voice caused both the driver and Shi Yao to turn to look at him. The driver quickly recovered from his daze and replied with an all right before changing the route. If he's going home, what about me? Shi Yao stared at Lin Jiej for 5 seconds before the car passed by a subway station. She quickly spoke up, then, Let me down. I'll take the subway back to school. What about the cake? Lin Jiej shot a glance at Shi Yao as he asked coldly. So, he's going home to bring me a cake? Before Shi Yao could say anything, Lin Jiej had already spoken up. You can't be thinking of having me bring it back to your dormitory, right? Without any hesitation, Shi Yao shook her head vehemently. And no. 6 years ago, when his resistance was futile and he was forced to accept her as his fiancée, he had explained the rules to her in private. That was the only thing he had said to her in the first 3 years of her life. Even though she was still very young back then, she still remembered it, and for the next 6 years, she didn't dare to forget about it. Your identity as my fiancé is acknowledged by my grandfather. As for me, don't even think about it. I'll never acknowledge you as my fiancé. The fiancé I acknowledge will definitely be someone I like. She's definitely prettier than you, more elegant than you, cleaner than you, cuter than you, purer than you, cuter than you, purer than you, more, he said more than you many times, and every single one of his words was filled with disdain. So, don't think that just because my grandfather made you my fiancé, we'll still be strangers from the start to the end. Even if my grandfather transfers you to my school, you'd better watch your mouth in school. If I hear any rumors about us, I'll never forgive you." He didn't even give her a chance to speak before he said everything clearly, after which he turned around and left. But barely after taking 2 steps, he suddenly turned around and added with a commanding tone, "Do you hear me?" When she nodded, he seemed satisfied and swaggered off. At that time, she was really young, only 13 years old. His fierce look really scared her a little, causing her to only eat a bowl of rice that night. Recalling this sight, Shi Yao discreetly rubbed her stomach. To this day, she could still vaguely remember that night. She was so hungry that she couldn't sleep, and she felt so uncomfortable that she wanted to cry. He was just saying it casually to stop her from going back to school. Why did she take it so seriously? Not wanting to dwell too much on this matter, Lin Jiej casually nodded his head in an attempt to turn the matter around. But in Shi Yao's eyes, his perfunctory attitude seemed to be saying, "Who would believe you?" Shi Yao spoke up once more, and the aura around her grew much more solemn. "I still remember the words you said back then. That's why, all these years, I've never mentioned your name, and I've never spouted nonsense. None of my friends in school know that you and I..." Initially, Shi Yao wanted to use the word relationship with him, but after some thought, she realized that there was no relationship between the two of them at all. Thus, she changed her words and said, "We've talked." Chapter 90. Shi Yao wasn't sure if it was just her imagination, but as her explanation grew clearer and clearer, she felt the air in the car growing thinner and thinner. She didn't say anything wrong, so why did the atmosphere suddenly become like this? Shi Yao fell silent for 2 seconds before discreetly sneaking a glance at Lin Jiej, who was seated beside her. At this moment, a thin layer of ice seemed to have formed on the usually aloof man's face. His eyebrows, eyes, and even his slightly pursed lips were emanating an indescribable chill. How strange. He was the one who said those words, so why did he suddenly become so unhappy? Could it be that I've said too many things to him? Shi Yao's eyes darted around in thought, and she felt that this was the most likely possibility. According to his rules, he didn't know her, so he was unwilling to interact with her too much. Why was she so foolish earlier? Shi Yao tactfully shut her mouth and told herself not to talk to Lin Jiej anymore. The car returned to its usual silence. The car slowly drove in the direction of the Lin family, but the cold expression on Lin Jiej's face didn't show any signs of melting. In truth, he was a little confused when she said, "I remember everything you said back then." He didn't really understand what she was referring to, but it was only after she said something else that he vaguely recalled that there was indeed such a thing. How should he describe the situation back then? He felt a little indignant and angry, but he had nowhere to vent his anger, so he ended up directing all of his emotions at her. He blamed her a little. If it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have gotten a fiancé out of nowhere. No one liked the feeling of being coerced, and under his grandfather's coercion, his disgust for her grew exponentially. Under such circumstances, it went without saying that the words he said were as harsh as they could be. In truth, she wasn't in the wrong either. What she said was the truth, but he had no idea what was bothering him at this moment. Was it because she still remembered what he said back then, or was it because he acted on impulse, or was it because she used the words said to define their relationship? The more Lin Jiej thought about it, the more agitated he felt. And the more agitated he felt, the more stifling the atmosphere in the car became. In the end, even he couldn't take it anymore. Reaching out, he rolled down the car window, allowing the spring breeze to flow into the car. Just as the car was about to reach the Lin family residence, Shi Yao's phone suddenly rang. She picked up the call, but due to Lin Jiej's presence, her voice sounded a little weak. "Hello? Senior Han? No, I haven't reached school yet. Something cropped up, so I might be a little late." Hearing Shi Yao's words, Lin Jiej's eyebrows twitched slightly. He took out his phone, which only had 5% battery left, and began typing out a message. Chapter 91. Without saying a word, Lin Jiej pushed open the car door and got out. Shi Yao followed suit, but she didn't forget to thank the driver politely. "Thank you." The driver replied guiltily with, "Yeah, you're welcome," before stepping on the accelerator and speeding away. Was he imagining things? Why did it feel like the Lin family chauffeur was getting more and more difficult over the past decade? Facing the door, Lin Jiej keyed in 666666, and after the door opened, he walked into the courtyard. However, after taking 2 steps, he noticed that Shi Yao wasn't following him, so he turned around to look at her. Meeting Lin Jiej's gaze, Shi Yao thought for a moment, and it seemed like it was time for her to speak. "So," she said, "I'll wait for you here." Lin Jiej's gaze seemed to have turned even colder, but his tone was still relatively calm. "I want to take a bath first. It might take a while, so I'll come in and wait." Shi Yao walked into the courtyard, and after a moment of thought, she said, "Why don't I take the cake first? You can leave after you're done bathing. It doesn't seem appropriate for us to be in the same car. If someone sees us at the school gates." Before Shi Yao could finish her words, Lin Jiej had already interjected, "I didn't bring my wallet," following which, his footsteps quickened significantly, creating a huge distance between them. Shi Yao wanted to say that she could give him money, but just as the words were about to come out of her mouth, she suddenly remembered that she had accidentally spent too much on snacks while browsing Taobao 2 days ago. She was only left with 100 RMB now. There was no way she could give him money. Left with no choice, Shi Yao followed Lin Jiej into the house silently. It was fortunate that she had been to the Lin family's old residence before, and there were slippers for her in the shoe cabinet. Thus, she changed into her slippers and headed to the living room. Lin Jiej, who had entered the house a little earlier than her, happened to be walking out of the dining room with a cup of hot chocolate in his hands. He walked up to her and passed the hot chocolate over. "Have something to drink first." "I'm going to take a bath," Shi Yao replied with an "oh" as she reached out to take it. Perhaps it was due to his carelessness, or perhaps it was due to the way she received it. The hot chocolate spilled all over Shi Yao. It was fortunate that the temperature wasn't too high, so she wasn't scalded. However, her clothes. Shi Yao lowered her head to look at the large stain on her chest, and a troubled look appeared on her face. How was she going to return to school like this? After which, as if knowing what she was troubled about, he pointed to the upper floor and said, "You should take a bath first. I'll head to my sister's room to look for a suitable set of clothes for you." "I guess that's all I can do," Shi Yao replied with an "oh" before following Lin Jiej up the stairs. Chapter 92. Just as Shi Yao was examining Lin Jiej's bedroom, the young man walked out of the changing room with a white t-shirt in his hand. Shi Yao quickly retracted her gaze and looked at Lin Jiej. Lin Jiej tossed the t-shirt to her and said, "Put on my clothes and go take a shower. I'll go to my sister's bedroom to help you look through your clothes." Hugging Lin Jiej's t-shirt tightly, Shi Yao nodded. After Lin Jiej left the bedroom, Shi Yao entered the washroom. A second later, the sound of running water could be heard from the washroom, and a second later, Lin Jiej, who had casually grabbed a dress from Lin Jiej's wardrobe, dashed into the bedroom. Just as he tossed the dress onto the bed, Shi Yao's phone, which was placed on the bedside table, rang. Lin Jiej glanced at the caller ID. It was Han Jing. "Is he calling to ask me when I'm going back to school again? He sure is patient." Lin Jiej switched Shi Yao's phone to silent so as not to disturb her in the washroom. At the same time, he stood up and began pacing around the bedroom. When he made the second turn, his gaze fell on the door of his bedroom. "Didn't you say that the specialty would spoil after a night? Then all I have to do is trap her here for a night." With such a thought in mind, Lin Jiej walked over to his bedroom, picked up the key, and turned it around and around the lock. After a long while, he finally pulled the key out and twisted the doorknob. After confirming that the door was locked from the inside and that it could only be opened from the outside, he walked over to the balcony, pulled open the window, and mercilessly tossed the key into the blossoming flowers below. After taking a shower, Shi Yao looked around the bathroom for a hairdryer, but it was to no avail. In the end, she could only open the door and walk out. Lin Jiej was sitting on the sofa with a nonchalant expression, playing with his charging phone. He was much taller than her, so his t-shirt only reached up to her thighs. Even so, Shi Yao still felt a little unnatural with most of her legs exposed. She subconsciously squeezed her thighs together before speaking weakly to Lin Jiej. "That hairdryer." Hearing her voice, Lin Jiej raised his head to look at her. Her half-wet long hair draped over her shoulders. Perhaps it was because of the hot water. Her face was flushed. Although she wasn't tall, her body was well proportioned. Her legs were long and straight, especially the part that was exposed, which was dazzlingly white. Lin Jie stared at her for a long while before he finally snapped out of his daze. He walked over to the table, took out a hairdryer from the drawer, and tossed it onto the table. With a thank you, Shiyao walked over and grabbed the hairdryer. She plugged in the power on the table and was about to blow her hair when she stared at a magazine on the table with wide eyes. That magazine was written in Japanese. She did not understand what it meant, but the woman in the picture had big breasts, fair skin, and sexy movements. Even though she had never read such a book, she knew that this was not suitable for children. Noticing that she wasn't blow-drying her hair, Lin Jie shot a perplexed look at her before following her gaze to the table. When he saw the words on the magazine, 1,000 curses of Liang Juicy, screw you, flashed across his mind. The hell? A few days ago, I came to stay over at his place, and at night, I hugged a book and felt my blood boiling with excitement. In the end, it turns out to be a Japanese erotic manga. The problem is, you can read it, but can't you take it with you when you leave? Chapter 94. Forget it. It's best if I don't say anything. Lin Jie hastened his footsteps, intending to leave the bedroom as soon as possible to calm himself down. However, Lin Jie walked up to the door of the bedroom, stretched out his hand, and twisted the doorknob for a long time, but the door simply wouldn't open. The heck? What the heck is going on? Why won't the door open? Lin Jie exerted more strength, and just as he was about to knock on the door, Shiyao, who had just finished drying her hair, suddenly asked, "What's wrong?" "The door is broken. I can't open it," Lin Jie said as he twisted the door lock, causing it to creak endlessly. How could the door be broken? Shiyao tossed the hairdryer aside and ran up to Lin Jie to take a closer look at the door lock. However, after examining it for less than 5 seconds, she suddenly looked at Lin Jie with a peculiar gaze and asked, "Isn't it locked from the inside? You should have just used the key to open it." How could he not know such a simple question? Hearing Shiyao's words, Lin Jie suddenly recalled that he was the one who locked the door from the inside. The reason was, it was fortunate that she had reminded him, or else he would still be immersed in the erotic manga incident. "Is that so?" Lin Jie replied calmly, after which, he let go of the doorknob and reached into his pocket to search for the key. He rummaged through his pocket, but he couldn't find the key anywhere. He muttered under his breath, "HM? That's weird. Where's the key? Could it be that I slipped on the sofa when I was sitting on it earlier?" As Lin Jie muttered to himself, he turned around and walked over to the sofa. Why isn't it here? I remember going upstairs with the key. Since he was putting on an act, he had to play it to the fullest. With this thought in mind, Lin Jie feigned a hazy memory and turned to look at Shiyao. "I went upstairs with the key, right?" Shiyao, who wasn't paying any attention to this at all, shook her head and replied honestly, "I didn't see anything. Where did I go after entering the bedroom?" Lin Jie pretended to be deep in thought. Thinking that everything was real, Shiyao replied obediently, "You went to the changing room, and you went to the table to get the hairdryer." Following Shiyao's instructions, Lin Jie went to all of the locations that she had pointed out. However, when he still couldn't find the key, he turned to Shiyao and said earnestly, "Can you help me look around too? What if I've missed something?" "Oh, all right." Shiyao obediently followed Lin Jie's instructions and began searching for the key. 10 minutes later, the key was still nowhere to be found. "Perhaps I left my keys on the bar counter when I was pouring your hot chocolate earlier." As Lin Jie spoke, he took out his phone and said, "I'll call them to open the door for us." "What? You went back to the countryside? You can't come back now?" "Gosh, you went to the suburbs to look at flowers with your friends? You want to resign? Your husband cheated on you? Are you going to catch an adulterer?" Lin Jie, who seemed to be constantly on the phone, but in truth, he hadn't made any calls at all. After hanging up the last call, he glanced at Shiyao and muttered, "People these days are getting more and more unprofessional. It looks like I'll have to call Annie's son and see if she can make some time to come back. Chapter 95. You can't come over? Grandpa is on a drip? Just lost? All right then. Lin Jiej paused for a moment before covering his phone with his hand and turning to Shi Yao. He said, Annie's son will only be able to come over after Grandpa's transfusion. Is that all right? After saying those words, Lin Jiej muttered to himself, but I wonder if something will happen to Grandpa tonight without Annie's son around? Shi Yao was just about to nod in agreement when she heard Lin Jiej's first sentence, but upon hearing his second sentence, her words froze on the tip of her tongue. Grandpa Lin was currently in a critical condition. If Annie's son were to return to open the door for them, what if something were to happen to Grandpa Lin during this period of time? She didn't have class the next morning. Although she was going to have hot pot with her roommates tonight, she could ask them to change the time. However, if that was the case, they would have to stay in this room for the entire night. Shi Yao hesitated for a moment before speaking up. Why don't you ask Annie's son not to come over? Grandpa Lin can't do without her. Having achieved his goal, Lin Jiej's expression was incomparably calm. He seemed to be conflicted over something as well, and after half a minute, he finally reluctantly said, All right then. After which, Lin Jiej placed the phone by his ear and said, Forget it, there's no need for that. Take good care of Grandpa. After hanging up the phone, the whole bedroom fell into silence. Sitting on the sofa to the north of the bed, Lin Jiej elegantly grabbed his phone and began sending frenzied messages to Liang Jusi. Screw you, Liang Jusi, you piece of trash, you bastard, you shameless pervert. Liang Jusi quickly replied with a message. My grandpa is no longer around. Why don't you consider me? Scram, scram, scram. I'm telling you, I'm not done with you. Liang Jusi, did I offend you? I kept sneezing just now. Tell me, did you scold me? I'm F*King impotent from your text bombardment. Oh, you actually have a small penis? I thought you didn't. I can only rely on erotic comics to fantasize. Meanwhile, Shi Yao took out her phone and sat on the carpet to the south of the bed. She began apologizing to her roommates in the WeChat group. Babies, I'm sorry. I have something on today, so I won't be able to return to school. Can we reschedule for tonight? Lotus Leaf He Tian, Yao Yao, I hate you. Lemon, Lungwan, what? I love Li Yifeng, Jiangyu, Hemph, Infinity, G. Please look into my eyes if you stand me up. Separated by a bed, Shi Yao and Lin Jiej didn't say a word to one another. In this peaceful atmosphere, after a long time, Shi Yao's phone finally rang. It was a call from Han Jing. Shi Yao was in the midst of playing with her phone when she picked up the call. Senior Han? Lin Jiej, who was in the midst of criticizing Liang Jusi, abruptly halted his typing. I'm sorry, Senior Han. I was taking a shower just now and didn't look at my phone. I can't go back to school today. You and your classmates should hurry up and eat the specialty. Don't spoil it. Don't say any more. The more you talk, the more I want to eat it. Was there so much to talk about? The second round, due to her uncomfortable sitting posture, Shi Yao had to change her seat. Lin Jiej was a little far away from her, but since she had changed her seat, he was able to catch a glimpse of her entire body from the corner of his eye. Her phone was facing away from him, so he couldn't see her screen clearly. However, her fair and slender legs kept darting into his field of vision. Note: the song Lin Jiej sang was A Short Love Lasts, and it became very popular on TikTok. Hello, TikTok. After taking a few steps, he suddenly stopped moving. His gaze uncontrollably fell onto Shi Yao's thigh once more. Boss, you only have a sliver of health left. You're going to die soon. Lu Binlei's voice sounded in the earpiece. Lin Jiej had lost count of how many times he had been jolted awake. He was just about to heal himself when an AI suddenly appeared behind him and fired a shot at him, following which, he collapsed to the ground. Chapter 98. Xia Shangzhou. You didn't see wrongly, you didn't see wrongly. Our boss was really killed by a robot. What a humiliation. Lu Binlai. How infuriating. He was actually killed by a robot. Amidst Lu Binlai and Xia Shangzhou's merciless ridicule, Lin Jiej silently put down his phone. Without their main damage dealer, Lin Jiej, they barely made it to the final circle. All along, Shi Yao had thought that 11111 was caught up in something and couldn't focus on the game, resulting in such a situation. But in the fourth round, 111,111's performance was even more bizarre. When he jumped out of the plane, he jumped in a completely different direction from everyone else. And that wasn't all. He even opened his parachute in midair and floated in the air for a very long time before he finally landed on the ground. No one knew what he did after he landed, but after a while, a car logo appeared behind his profile picture. Shi Yao thought that he was going to drive over to look for them, but after waiting for a while, she realized that he was getting further and further away from them. Curious, Shi Yao tapped on the minimap to check on 111,111's location, and she couldn't help but sweat in embarrassment. 11111 had actually driven his car into the sea. In the fifth round, 111,111 didn't jump out of the plane by himself. Instead, he chose to follow her. As soon as he landed, he coincidentally entered the same room as Shi Yao. The self-aware Shi Yao didn't pick up any good equipment and left them to less than 111,111. However, as if a wooden statue, 11111 stood by the window of the room, not moving for a long time. When he finally reacted, he bent down to pick up a harmless smoke grenade. Unable to speak, Shi Yao was rendered speechless for a moment. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore and sent over. 11111 didn't respond to her. Instead, he froze on the spot once more. Shi Yao then typed another line. Why aren't you picking up anything? Before Shi Yao could send those words, less than 111,111 had already been killed by a hail of bullets from the opposite house. The sixth round, the seventh round, the eighth round, the ninth round. It was as if Mr. Numbers was possessed by her. He was either hammered to death, rammed to death, smashed to death by a frying pan, or drowned in the sea. In any case, he was reduced to a crate. Boss's condition isn't right? It's not just wrong, it's very wrong. I've never seen such a new boss. This isn't my boss. In my heart, my boss is unparalleled. An existence that can compete with the sun and the moon. Boss, did someone hack your account? Bro, it's shameless to steal an account. Please go offline quickly. Paying no heed to Lu Binlai and Xia Shangzhou's outburst, Lin Jiej took off his earphones, tossed his phone aside, and chose to hang out in the game. In order to prevent himself from looking at Shi Yao again, he leaned against the sofa and closed his eyes to rest. But barely half a minute had passed before the image of Shi Yao's fair and long legs surfaced in his mind. The dry mouth, panic, fever, and other symptoms that appeared when he was playing the game appeared again. Closing his eyes, Lin Jiej breathed in and out repeatedly, only to find that his body grew hotter and hotter. His mouth and tongue grew parched, and his heartbeat grew even more erratic. Calm down, calm down. 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 = to Shi Yao's fair thighs. The heck? Unable to take it any longer, Lin Jiej abruptly stood up from the sofa and headed to the changing room to grab a set of home clothes before heading to the bathroom. Chapter 99. By the time the 10th game was over, it was already midnight. Juice, an expert, who had lessons the next morning, told Shi Yao that she wasn't playing anymore. Shi Yao replied with an "oh." Out of curiosity, she sent a private message to Expert of the Monkeys and asked, "What's wrong with your boss? Why does he look so weird today?" Expert of the Monkeys, I don't know. Juice and I are curious too. He's never been like this before. Yao loves ice cream. Don't you guys live in the same dormitory? Expert of the Monkeys, yeah, but our boss didn't return to the dormitory today. This is the first time our boss hasn't returned to the dormitory during class. Something's going on. Expert of the Monkeys, Sis Yao, do you think our boss went out to do something bad behind Juice and my back? Hee hee. Shi Yao replied with ellipses as she thought. This is the first time I'm seeing a guy who's more gossipy than a girl like me. After the message was sent, Shi Yao, who was still disdainful of expert of the monkeys' gossipy nature a second ago, couldn't help but tap on the screen. Your boss actually didn't return to the dormitory? Who knows, he might really have a girlfriend. Does this mean that after tonight, your boss won't be as pure as ice anymore? Wahahaha. Your boss actually met his onin jeeping. Shi Yao and expert of the monkeys discussed for quite a while before they finally bade each other good night and ended the gossip. The bedroom was very quiet, and she could vaguely hear the sound of running water coming from the bathroom. If she wasn't mistaken, Lin Jiej had been in the bathroom for more than half an hour. How did he take so long to shower? Scary. A man like him is actually living a more delicate life than a girl like me. With no one to accompany her, Shi Yao fell into a daze for a while before tapping on a video streaming app to watch A Bite of China to pass the time. Shi Yao had no idea how long she watched it for, but she could remember that drowsiness was slowly creeping up on her. By the time she finally succumbed to sleep, the sound of running water still hadn't stopped. After taking a cold shower for more than an hour, Lin Jiej finally calmed down. He turned off the faucet, wiped himself dry, and put on his clean home clothes. Then, he stood at the door of the bathroom and silently thought, 1 + 1 = 2. Finally, he opened the door and walked out of the bathroom. He walked to the table and picked up the hairdryer. Just as he was about to blow dry his hair, he saw a girl lying on the carpet not far from him, asleep. Soft bonjour is bold. To think that she would dare to sleep so casually in the same room as a stranger. Lin Jiej stared at Shi Yao for a moment before putting down the hairdryer. He walked over to her and bent down to pick her up. She was probably really sleepy because he didn't wake her up. He gently placed her on the bed. When he got up, his gaze landed on her chest. The collar of his t-shirt was a little big on her body, and he could vaguely see half of her chest. It was just a single glance, but Lin Jiej quickly averted his gaze. With a reddened face, he pulled the blanket over her tightly. He stood up straight, but his feet seemed to be enchanted. He couldn't move no matter how hard he tried. Chapter 100. In the instant that his lips touched hers, he suddenly stopped. It was as if he was fighting against something with all his might. A glint flickered in the depths of his eyes, and even after a long time, he still chose not to touch her. He tilted his head slightly to avoid her lips before holding his breath in silence for a moment. After which, he straightened his body and switched off the lights in the bedroom, leaving only the night light on before walking away. As she was asleep, he didn't blow his hair dry, fearing that the noise from the hairdryer would wake her up. Leaning against the sofa, he absent-mindedly fiddled with his phone for a while before turning his head to look at her on the bed. As he stared at her, he suddenly felt the urge to take a cold shower in the bathroom. This feeling sure is killing me. Is it because I've never touched a woman before that I can't control myself? He suddenly felt that trapping her in his room for an entire night just to prevent her from returning to the academy was a foolish move. Lin Jiej forced himself to retract his gaze, fearing that he might really do something disrespectful to her. Thus, he sat on the sofa for a while, longer before getting up and quietly making his way to the balcony with his phone in hand. Outside in the middle of the night, it was eerily quiet. Leaning against the white jade railing of the balcony, he gazed at the night sky for a while before sighing deeply. It wasn't that he hadn't endured long nights before, but today's night was even longer and more torturous than his nights alone. The next day, Shi Yao woke up naturally from her sleep. She opened her eyes and stared blankly at her unfamiliar surroundings for a moment before realizing that she was in Lin Jiej's bedroom. And she was lying on Lin Jiej's bed. Shi Yao stared at the ceiling in a daze for 10 seconds before she hurriedly tore off her blanket and leaped out of bed. Wasn't I sleeping on the floor? Why am I on the bed? Shi Yao lowered her head to take a look at her clothes before looking around the bedroom. The room was empty, and Lin Jiej was nowhere to be seen. Beside the pillow was a dress, and on top of the dress were some toiletries. They were probably meant for her. The door to the bedroom was ajar. Clearly, someone had opened it from the outside with a key. So, Lin Jiej had already gone out? After making sense of the situation, Shi Yao grabbed the toiletries by the pillow and walked into the bathroom. Halfway through brushing her teeth, She suddenly looked at herself in the mirror and widened her eyes. Last night. Was it Lin Jiej who carried her to bed last night? Shi Yao's face reddened, and for some reason, her heartbeat became erratic. After washing up, Shi Yao didn't dare to linger in Lin Jiej's bedroom any longer. She quickly grabbed her things and headed downstairs. As soon as she walked into the living room, she saw Lin Jiej sitting on the sofa. Suddenly, she remembered that he had carried her to bed last night. She blushed again and stopped in her tracks awkwardly. "Good morning." "Morning." Lin Jiej was only able to say a single word before an Achu snatched the rest of his sentence away. Shi Yao turned to look at him in shock. It was only then that she realized that he was carrying a tissue box in his embrace, and the table in front of him was filled with discarded tissues. Did he catch a cold? Before Shi Yao could say a word, Lin Jiej had already tossed aside the tissue in his hand and stood up. "Let's go. The driver has been waiting outside for quite some time now." As he spoke, he let out another Achu. Just like how they had entered the Lin family yesterday, Lin Jiej walked in front while Shi Yao followed behind him. However, along the way, there were a few more sneezes than yesterday. By the time Lin Jiej gracefully stirred the wonton with a spoon to cool it down, Shi Yao had already finished half a bowl. By the time Lin Jiej finished 3 dumplings, Shi Yao had already finished a huge bowl. By the time Lin Jiej finished half a bowl of wontons, Shi Yao had already finished 2 big bowls. By the time Lin Jiej finished 2/3 of a bowl of wontons, Shi Yao had already finished half of her 3rd bowl. Lin Jiej decided to stop eating altogether and stared at Shi Yao in front of him. By the time Shi Yao finished her 3rd bowl, Lin Jiej stared at the 3 empty bowls in front of him and blinked his eyes repeatedly. Slowly, his shattered soul began to gather back together. So, did she really order those 3 bowls of wontons for herself? 3 big bowls. Chapter 102. It took a long time before a comment surfaced in Lin Jiej's mind. "You sure have a big appetite. To think that you can eat more than a grown man like me. How embarrassing." After eating her fill, Shi Yao noticed that Lin Jiej was staring at the 3 bowls in front of her, not moving his spoon at all. Ignoring her, she turned to Lin Jiej and asked, "Are you full?" "Actually, I'm not full yet. It's just that I'm suffering from a terrible cold and dizziness, so I don't have much of an appetite." Lin Jiej replied with a light in response. 1, 2, 3, 4. He actually had 6 wontons left uneaten. What a pity. What a waste. Shi Yao looked at the remaining half a bowl of dumplings in Lin Jiej's bowl, and she hesitated for a moment before raising her hand and beckoning to the owner. "Boss, the bill." "Miss, what are you looking at? Don't tell me that you're still not full after eating 3 big bowls of dumplings, and you're still thinking of snatching my bowl of dumplings as well?" Afraid that Shi Yao would suddenly reach out and snatch the bowl away from him, Lin Jiej discreetly reached out and pulled the bowl closer to him. Only after the boss walked over and reported the price did he let go of the bowl and reach into his pocket for some change. Shi Yao also took out her money and said, "Let me do it." Lin Jiej passed the money to the owner first and said, "I don't have the habit of living off a woman." Living off a woman. It referred to a man being supported by a woman, and it was commonly referred to as a gigolo. He's treating me as a gigolo? Shi Yao's gaze on Lin Jiej turned a little bizarre. Meeting her gaze, Lin Jiej was taken aback for a moment before he realized that he had used the wrong words. "What's wrong with me?" Ever since she saw the erotic manga on my table last night, I've been saying the wrong word. Lin Jiej rubbed his throbbing temples as he added, "What I meant was that I don't have the habit of letting a woman treat me to a meal." Oh. Shi Yao nodded her head vigorously, indicating that she understood. Lin Jiej took the change from the owner and kicked the chair behind him away. "Let's go." Shi Yao took her things and obediently followed behind him. The driver didn't leave, waiting by the roadside. However, Shi Yao didn't follow Lin Jiej. About that. Hearing that voice, Lin Jiej halted his footsteps and turned around to look at Shi Yao. He saw that she was standing at the entrance of the breakfast shop, not following him, and a slight frown appeared on his forehead. "Shi Yao, why don't you get the driver to send you back to school?" It's not too far from here, so I'll just walk over. The frown on Lin Jie's forehead deepened. Seeing that Zhang Xian wasn't reacting to her words, Shi Yao explained, well, it's almost time for morning classes, so there should be a lot of people in the academy. It won't be good if we return to the academy like this. How strange. There's nothing wrong with what she said. He doesn't want anyone to know that they're acquainted. Noticing that Lin Jie's expression had turned even darker, Shi Yao couldn't help but mutter under her breath. So, you should get on the car. I won't be joining you. Lin Jie's lips were tightly pursed together as he stared at Shi Yao with an indescribably fearsome gaze. Shi Yao took a small step back, deciding to slip away. I'll be leaving first. Bye-bye. As she said those words, Shi Yao began walking toward the entrance of the academy. Barely after taking 2 steps, she caught a glimpse of Lin Jie walking toward her with a livid expression from the corner of her eye. What is he doing? It can't be that he's going to beat me up, right? Chapter 103. But before she could even get 2 meters away, Lin Jie suddenly grabbed her arm. Why you? Before Shi Yao could finish her sentence, Lin Jie had already interjected. You take the car back to school. I'll walk back. Shi Yao was stunned. 2 seconds later, she raised her head to look at Lin Jie. The young man's expression didn't show any signs of improving, but there wasn't the slightest hint of displeasure in his tone. If she had to describe his tone, it would be helplessness and dejection. Why would he speak in such a tone? While Shi Yao was still in a daze, Lin Jie had already pulled her arm over to the car and said, Take her back to school. Don't forget about the cake in the trunk. Remember to pass it to her when she alights. The driver. Yes, young master. Without saying a word, Lin Jie opened the car door and shoved Shi Yao inside. Just as he was about to close the door, he suddenly seemed to have thought of something. He placed one arm on the roof of the car and the other on the door. Leaning forward slightly, he stared at Shi Yao and asked, Are you very close with Liang Juxi's cousin? Lin Jie had no idea just how seductive his actions were in the eyes of the onlookers. Shi Yao felt as if there was a little deer hiding in her heart, running around aimlessly. She gulped down a mouthful of saliva, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop the little deer. Thinking that she didn't know who Liang Juxi was, Lin Jie continued, Liang Juxi's cousin, the last next door. Her name is Liang. Lin Jie shot a glance at the driver, and the driver quickly added, Moo. Ah, that's her. As Lin Jie spoke, he turned his gaze back to Shi Yao and asked, Are you very close with her? Shi Yao tried her best to calm the little deer that was running around in her heart. We're pretty close. Whenever she has something good to eat, she'll share it with me. Miss, are you using this method to determine the degree of closeness? Lin Jie was silent for a moment before he moved his lips once more. About that, he only spoke those 2 words before he suddenly stopped. Shi Yao raised her head and looked at him. What's wrong? Lin Jie didn't say a word. Shi Yao waited for a moment before asking, Lin Jie? Recovering from his daze, Lin Jie replied with a faint, It's nothing, before closing the door and taking 2 steps back, signaling for the driver to leave. As the car started up, Shi Yao glanced at Lin Jie through the window. The youth sneezed again. He took out a tissue from his pocket and wiped his nose. Being handsome indeed had its benefits. Even such an unsightly action was a beautiful sight to behold when it was done by him. After sighing, Shi Yao suddenly recalled Lin Jie's earlier question, Are you very close with Liang Juxi's cousin? She pursed her lips and lowered her eyes. Although he didn't say it, she seemed to know what he was going to say. Chapter 104. How strange. He was just about to tell her to stop hanging out with Liang Juxi's cousin. But why couldn't he bring himself to say those words? Was it because he was afraid that she would be upset after learning that her close friend had ulterior motives? Or was it because he was afraid that she would think that he was overthinking things and think too badly of her friend? Perhaps there was a reason behind all of these, but he was indeed afraid that she would be upset. Just like how she had been mocked by 2 of Liang Juxi's friends at the Golden Resplendence a while ago, he really didn't want to see that happen to her a second time. Forget it. I'll just have a chat with Liang Juicy and have him keep an eye on my cousin. But Liang Juicy, who only knew how to read erotic comics every day, had such a low IQ. Why was his cousin so scheming? She didn't seem like someone from the same family at all. He had to admit that Liang Juicy's cousin really knew how to put on an act. Those few casual words she said to his grandfather might seem harmless on the surface, but in truth, she was trying to tell him that Soft Bun had an unusual relationship with another man. Wasn't she hinting to him that Soft Bun was still fooling around outside, even though she had him as her fiancé? Why are there so many things that girls do? What's wrong with you? With this thought in mind, Lin Jiej leisurely walked toward the entrance of the school. He didn't notice that there was someone in a car about 10 meters behind him who had just recorded the scene. On the way back to his dormitory room, Lin Jiej didn't forget to buy a box of cold medicine from the school infirmary. Pushing open the door to his dormitory room, he thought that Xia Shangzhou and Lu Binlai were still asleep, but the two of them were already neatly dressed, standing guard at the entrance like two guardians. Lunatics. Lin Jiej shot them a disdainful glance before walking into the dormitory room. Lu Binlai quickly followed behind him, holding a bottle of yogurt as if it was alcohol. "Boss, I have alcohol. Please tell me your story." Xia Shangzhou hurriedly grabbed a few ham sausages and instant noodles from the cupboard before walking over as well. "Boss, I have meat. Please tell me your fortuitous encounter last night. Is it too late for me to change dormitories now?" With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jiej pulled out a chair, sat down, and switched on his laptop. Seeing that Lin Jiej was ignoring them, Xia Shangzhou and Lu Binlai's tone immediately softened. "Boss, I'm begging you. Please tell us." "Boss, don't you love Little Lai Lai? You don't even talk to Little Lai about anything. Little Lai is so sad." With an impassive expression, Lin Jiej keyed in his computer's password and took out the USB drive to copy something. Lu Binlai, "Daddy." Xia Shangzhou, "Dad." Lu Binlai, "Son, you're addressing him wrongly. You should be calling him Grandpa." Xia Shangzhou, F***ck off. The two of them argued for quite a while before they realized that they had gone off topic. They quickly turned to look at Lin Jiej, but before they could say anything, Xia Shangzhou's sharp eyes caught sight of what Lin Jiej was copying. With a horrified look on his face, he exclaimed, "Boss, didn't you say that you didn't want to take on this project? You feel that this project is too difficult and pays too little, so it's not worth it. Why did you accept it now?" While tapping on the keyboard, Lin Jiej casually replied, "Oh, I suddenly realized that I'm very poor." "Boss, you're insulting me." "Yes. Not counting the family assets, just the savings in your bank account alone is more than 8 digits. How dare you say you're poor? You're showing off." Chapter 105. "That's right. Boss, you'll lose me if you continue like this." "You'll lose me too." Heh. As if he had heard the funniest joke in the world, Lin Jiej sneered disdainfully and said disdainfully, "You make it sound as if I've had you before." Lu Binlai, "Boss, as long as you're willing, you can have me anytime you want." Xia Shangzhou, "Boss, I'll warm your bed for you tonight." "Oh no, I'll warm the bed for my 8-digit savings." Lin Jiej's lips twitched. He couldn't be bothered with these two shameless fellows anymore. After copying the documents, Lin Jiej switched off his laptop and picked up a book by the side. "I'm going to be late. Let's head to class." Xia Shangzhou and Lu Binlai grabbed their textbooks and followed behind him. While walking out of the dormitory room, Lu Binlai didn't forget to ask, "Boss, I'm serious. Why did you suddenly accept that project?" "That's right." Before Lin Jiej could finish his words, Xia Shangzhou had already interjected, "Boss, don't tell me that you suddenly feel that I'm poor or something like that to fool a 3-year-old. No, even a 3-year-old wouldn't be fooled by such words. I'm being serious. I really do feel that I'm a little poor, so I recently discovered a..." At this point, Lin Jiej suddenly paused and swallowed the words "a girl" back into his stomach. Then, he changed his words, "a pet that has a huge appetite. It's the kind that can eat 3 men's meals in a single meal. I'm afraid that my savings won't be enough, so I decided to work hard to earn some money." Xia Shangzhou widened his eyes in shock. "What kind of pet is that?" It actually has such a huge appetite? Lu Binlai's mouth widened in shock. Boss, the pet you're talking about can't be a pig, right? Ha 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 ha. Lu Binlai and Xia Shangzhou burst into heartless laughter. However, their laughter only lasted for less than 3 seconds before it abruptly died down. That was because their boss's expression was filled with displeasure. Lu Binlai reacted swiftly, and in the next second, he shot a thumbs up at Lin Jiej and began fawning over him, as expected of our boss. Even a pet you're raising is so refreshing. Xia Shangzhou and Lu Binlai reacted in unison. Boss, I'm begging you for the type of pet. I want to raise the same pet as you. You must be joking. How could Softbun be a pig? Even if it was a pig, it was the one and only pig in this world. So, if you want to raise the same type, dream on. With this thought in mind, Lin Jiej hastened his footsteps. Lu Binlai and Xia Shangzhou shouted, Boss, as they sped up as well. Lu Binlai, Boss, speaking of which, where did you go last night? Don't tell me something really happened? Xia Shangzhou, that's right, boss. You can't be like this. If you're not honest, you're not your roommate. This is the first time you didn't return home during the time you didn't ask for leave. Also, boss, your dark eye circles are very heavy. It's obvious that you didn't sleep at all last night. So fierce. Furthermore, boss, you even caught a cold. Don't tell me you're doing it outdoors? Lu Binlai, holy shit, my nose is about to bleed. I didn't know that our boss was such a good player. You know how to play your sister. At the mention of last night, Lin Jiej's face darkened by half. He didn't sleep for the whole night, but it wasn't a ferocious night. He had indeed done it outdoors, but he had been standing on the balcony, exposed to the cold wind for an entire night. If he were to talk about his fortuitous encounter last night, the greatest fortuitous encounter would probably be that he, a top student of the mathematics faculty, had forgotten what 1 + 1 was, and that he, the Adonis who claimed to be able to sleep with anyone who saw him, ended up running a cold fever last night. Chapter 106. Xia Shangzhou and Lu Binlai, who were still indulging in their fantasies by the side, suddenly noticed that there was something amiss with Lin Jiej's expression. The two of them thought that they had gone overboard with their jokes earlier, so they tactfully pretended that nothing had happened and changed the topic. Student Lu, the weather today isn't too bad. Student Xia, the weather isn't too bad today. The sky is clear, and there are white clouds everywhere. Retracting his thoughts, Lin Jiej shot a glance at Xia Shangzhou and Lu Binlai, who were discussing the weather with a serious look as if he was looking at a bunch of idiots. Then, he glanced at the smoggy air outside through the window of the school building's corridor, and he couldn't help but curse in his heart. Those two fools. I really want to pretend that I don't know them. What should I do? With such thoughts in mind, Lin Jiej hastened his footsteps. A second after the three of them entered the classroom, the class bell rang. Seated in the last row, Lin Jiej had only listened to the lecture for 5 minutes when he had already copied the information into his notebook and started reading through it seriously. There was a paragraph in which the letters appeared frequently. As Lin Jiej read through it, his gaze eventually landed on the letters. S. Shi Yao's initials. Once upon a time, he would remember her name so deeply that he would think of her whenever he saw a single letter. Lin Jiej reached out his finger to touch those on the screen. Then, he suddenly recalled that the information he had recalled last night wasn't everything. When he returned to his bedroom to use the toilet in the middle of the night, he saw a certain unique and unparalleled pet on his bed. She kicked the blanket away, and he walked up to cover her up. Perhaps it was because the temperature in the room was a little warm, but her face was flushed red. Lin Jiej picked up his phone and opened his photo album. There were only 2 photos in it. One was of her munching on an apple in his grandfather's ward yesterday afternoon. The sun was warm, and the years were peaceful. The young lady's eyebrows were adorned with a satisfied smile. The other was of her sleeping self last night. Her long eyelashes were slightly curled up like butterflies, and her rosy lips were slightly pouted. Her entire face was brimming with a heartwarming cuteness. At 8:00 in the evening, the 4 members of the sexy and frisky group gathered punctually on the desert map. 11111 wasn't as dazed as he was yesterday, but he wasn't in a particularly good state either. At 10:30 p.m., 111,111 logged out of the game. Curious, Shiryao asked, "Why did your boss leave?" Juice, an expert, who had been chattering nonstop, did not reply to her in the voice chat. Instead, it was Expert of the Monkeys, who sent him a message. "Boss isn't feeling well. He's running a fever.